Historically, pilgrimages have taken place for over 3,000 years in one form or another as a devotional practice. It may surprise you to discover that to ancient civilizations, pilgrimage was an observance that everyday people took part in and was an important function of their spiritual traditions. Ancient Egyptians, for example, would travel to Abydos, west of the River Nile, in pilgrimage to honor the god Osiris. Their dearest wish was to eventually be buried there, or as near as they could afford. The importance of this was encouraged and supported by the successive pharaohs, who enlarged and embellished the temple of Osiris with opulent riches. In ancient Greece, the consultation of the oracles meant that people travelled over huge distances to Delphi, which the god Zeus considered to be the navel of Gaia, Mother Earth. Although earlier myths suggest that the Pythia was a well-established oracle and high priestess of the temple of Apollo prior to this, the Pythia was one of the most powerful women of the ancient Greeks. Her prestige and prophecies were highly sought after. At the temple of Zeus in Dodona was another oracle who attracted pilgrims from far beyond the Greek borders. Destroyed and rebuilt by the Roman Emperor Augustus, the oracle was consulted by the Emperor Julian in 362 before his campaign against the Persians. The oracle was still sought by pilgrims until 392, when the Christian Emperor Theodosius closed all pagan religious sites down. During the Middle Ages in Europe, Christian pilgrimage became a significant occupation for everyone who had the ability to do it. It became fashionable for kings and royals to make pilgrimage to Rome, the seat of the Holy Roman Empire. In 853, the young Alfred, later known as the Great, went to visit His Holiness the Pope with his father, King Athelwulf. In later years, Alfred believed his confirmation and being made Council of Rome, a spiritual son of the Pope, was a pinnacle in his becoming King of England. In 1027, King Canute was possibly the last English monarch to make this journey, and the Christian king of Viking descent to gain audience with the Pope. Not all so-called pilgrimages during the Middle Ages were peaceful, or even what we would define as a pilgrimage today. Between 1095 and 1291, a series of wars occurred directed by the Latin Church, known as the Crusades. The wars against the Muslim Empire were made to regain the lands surrounding Jerusalem, the place of Jesus Christ's death and burial, known as the Holy Lands. The Church promised knights who took part in the Crusades forgiveness of their sins, amongst other rewards for going to war. The First Crusade was actually called a peregrinatio, which translates as pilgrimage. After a long siege, Jerusalem was captured in 1099 with thousands killed. However, by the end in 1291, the Crusaders had not managed to hold on to any of the lands the Church sought. Pilgrimage wasn't just for the rich and famous. In the Middle Ages, over 1/5 of the European population had a direct connection to pilgrimage, either by going on one or having a links to the sites. The common people believed that by going on a pilgrimage to visit a sacred shrine, which was supposed to house a relic, a tooth, finger, or blood, for example, from a saint or other holy person, or a holy well, or sacred waters for healing, would ensure their place in heaven, that they would be cured or a range of ailments, and they would be forgiven all their sins. This is the time when the famous pilgrim routes and places came into prominence. The most popular in England was to the shrine of Thomas Becket at Canterbury Cathedral. Indeed, Geoffrey Chaucer's most famous work, The Canterbury Tales, was written at this time, depicting a set of tales by a group of pilgrims travelling to Canterbury to visit the Becket's shrine. At this time, most people who undertook pilgrimage walked for months to reach the final destination. The road was hard and dangerous. People travelled in groups for protection against criminals. Pilgrims would sometimes be forced to sleep by the roadside in all weathers and rely on the kindness of strangers for food. This abstinence from physical comforts would, however, bring you into a state of grace in the eyes of God. Another famous pilgrim site in the UK is Walsingham in Norfolk. The original pilgrimage site was founded in 1061 when the Lady of the Manor had a vision of the Virgin Mary and Angel Gabriel. She was instructed to build a replica of the Holy House in Nazareth at Walsingham. This then became a centre of pilgrimage in the 12th century. A priory was built to protect the Holy House and offer pilgrims sanctuary whilst visiting. The last mile from the aptly named Slipper Chapel to the shrine was often walked barefoot. The Slipper Chapel is today the Roman Catholic shrine. During the dissolution of the monasteries in 1536, the priory and holy buildings were destroyed, and the wooden holy house was razed to the ground. A new shrine was erected in the 1930s in a new holy house, and pilgrims were encouraged to return to Walsingham again. A Saxon well was discovered during the laying of the foundations. This is believed to be the Holy Well, where medieval pilgrims would go for healing. Pilgrimage was sometimes used as penance for a sin or crime of varying degrees of seriousness, which often led to disapproval from members of the church and result in obvious dangers to others. For example, someone found guilty of acts of violence is sent unaccompanied on a long journey. It's not hard to imagine what might have happened. For economic reasons, pilgrimage became a vital source of money for churches and even the towns surrounding them. Commerce in souvenirs and symbols of pilgrimage, which every pilgrim would, of course, covet and purchase as a sign of the completion of their pilgrimage, became commonplace. Tens of thousands of pilgrim badges have been found since the 19th century. Mainly in rivers, they are the most common pieces of art from the Middle Ages. The trade in pilgrim badges, which at the time could be purchased everywhere around a place of veneration and bore specific imagery relating to the site, was widespread and were affordable to everyone. Often made of lead and mass-produced, they were affixed with a pin on the back and worn on outer clothing. At the height of the Middle Ages, popular sites of veneration would sell over 100,000 a year. Another common souvenir was an ampullae, a small vial filled with water from the well or holy site and worn around the neck. The most recognized symbol, still used today, is the scallop shell, which represents the Camino de Santiago pilgrim route or Way of St. James. The cult of Christian pilgrimage in the UK began to lessen significantly between the 15th and 16th centuries. With the dissolution of the monasteries by Henry VIII, sites of veneration and elaborately decorated reliquaries housing holy relics were largely destroyed or taken into private collections. The new Protestant religion used simpler iconography in its churches, and the frivolity of pilgrimage was frowned upon. Emphasis was instead placed upon the individual's internal journey to grace. By 1536, the shrine of Thomas à Becket was destroyed, and the Bishop of St. David's Cathedral ordered pilgrimage to cease. The years of 1536 and 1537 were significant as it was the time of widespread revolt against Henry VIII and his separation from Rome in the north of England, known as the Pilgrimage of Grace. This was a series of rebellions which became a serious threat to the government of the time. At its height, 40,000 men were involved across Lincolnshire and Yorkshire, led by Robert Arskey, who was a skilled speaker and zealous Catholic, and came up with the title Pilgrimage of Grace, linking up with the idea of returning the church to Rome. As the rebellion grew in strength and began to spread south, Henry used delaying tactics and insisted the leaders come to London to answer questions, whereupon they were arrested and tried for treason. Arskey was taken back to Yorkshire, where he was executed. There was a resurgence of small-scale pilgrimage in the late 18th and 19th centuries with the rise of Romantic and Neo-Gothic movements. Travel was only for the wealthy, and travel companies specializing in trips to Rome and the Holy Lands began to offer specialized package holidays to the well-to-do tourists and adventurers. The Grand Tour was already an established rite of passage and became more widely available with the railways from 1840s. While not strictly pilgrimage in the original sense, the possibility and ease of travel meant that old pilgrim sites had new visitors. Around this time, a 14-year-old girl saw a vision of the Virgin Mary near Lourdes, which led to new sites of pilgrimage being established. This leads us nicely to pilgrimage in the modern day, which you can learn all about in a guide to pilgrimage by Thea Prothero, which you can get right now from Moonbooks Publishing. Thank you so much for watching, subscribe for weekly content, and we will see you next time.